Under Part 43, accompanied by the manufacturer's service manual, a pilot can complete preventative maintenance, leading to a better understanding of one's aircraft. First, begin by jacking up your aircraft using the approved jacking point. With your aircraft wheel off the ground, you can then unbolt these two bolts to release the free-floating brake calipers. The outboard brake pad will simply fall off, and the interior brake pad can be removed from the caliper. Replace these if needed. Next, you want to remove the cotter pin from the wheel nut. With the cotter pin removed, you can then remove the dowel and gain access to the wheel nut, which you want to unscrew to release the wheel. With the wheel nut removed, you can then pull the wheel off of the axle. You can then use this time to clean the axle. With the wheel now removed, next step is to remove the valve stem core from the valve stem, releasing all the air out of the tube. With the air now out of the tube, you can press down around the rim on both sides, front and back, to unseat the bead. With the beads then broken on both sides of the wheel, you can unbolt the wheel halves. When the bolts are removed, the wheel halves will simply separate. Each wheel half has its own wheel bearing. To get to the wheel bearing, you remove first the circlip, which holds the spacer and wheel bearing in. Then, you remove the spacer. Be sure to thoroughly clean all parts before reinstallation. And finally, the wheel bearing, which you're going to want to inspect for any debris or rust and make sure it spins smoothly. Before reinstalling the bearing, make sure you grease it well. Then clean the wheels and inspect for cracks. Then replace the wheel bearing, spacer, and circlip. Then align the tube valve stem with the spot on the tire, which represents the lightest spot of the tire. Then inflate the tube to ensure there are no wrinkles. Replace the valve stem core. Inspect one more time to ensure there are no wrinkles of the tube inside of the tire. Then, reinstall the wheel halves. Ensure that the tube is not going to be pinched by the wheel halves bolting together. When bolting the wheel halves together, check the service manual for torque specs. With a tire full of air, give it a few bounces to test. Then reinstall the tire on the axle. Secure the wheel by screwing the wheel nut on. You want this nut to be just tight enough to stop the wheel from wobbling, but not so tight as to restrict its rotation. Then insert the dowel, followed by the cotter pin to secure it all together. Then bend the cotter pin. Next, reinstall your brake pads to your caliper and bolt the caliper back on. Use your service manual to find out the torque specs on the caliper bolts. After getting the bolts started, you can then come in with your torque wrench and torque them to spec. And then you're all set and good to go. Remember to include the proper logbook entries as well.